In 1999, audiences thought a Star Wars movie about trade routes and Senate politics was boring. In 2026, it looks like a documentary on how world orders die. It may have been a fictional history from a galaxy far, far away, but science fiction can act as a sort of archive of consciousness, giving us a snapshot of society's fears and dreams. As always, this video isn't about science fiction predicting the future. Today, we're using Star Wars as a geopolitical laboratory to understand what happens when global governance stops working. Broadcast commencing in... Almost everybody on Earth knows the basics of Star Wars: lightsaber battles and space fights, fathers and sons, mystical knights with magical powers. But Star Wars has always been deeply political, full of power struggles and empires fighting guerrilla rebel groups that mirror our own world. The prequels aren't really about the rise of the Empire, they're about what happens when geopolitical governance systems fail. And today, that's what we're focusing on. In Star Wars, the Galactic Republic, made up of several planets and corporations, is ruled by the Galactic Senate. Over the course of the prequel movies, the Senate fails and is replaced by an imperial puppet regime. It's the culmination of years of procedural gridlock, widespread corruption, and bureaucratic stagnation. This leads to the famous line by Queen Amidala, played by young Natalie Portman.
So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.
But really, the system had died long before that. It was the moment the Senate could no longer resolve crises. In the movie, it's the Trade Federation blockade of planet Naboo, which soon turns into a full-scale invasion. In our world, it's Gaza, it's Ukraine. Serious crises, breaches of international law that the system could do nothing to stop. By now you've figured it out. The Galactic Senate can be seen as an analog for our international systems, particularly the United Nations. This is because of a fatal design flaw in the UN, a feature baked in at the start to ensure that the superpowers would participate: the Security Council. The Security Council is at the apex of the United Nations, with authority to oversee international conflict and prevent abuses of international law. But all 5 permanent members of the Security Council, UK, France, Russia, China, and the USA, hold veto power, the ability to say no to any resolution. Of course, that means that anytime their interests are directly affected, we see the veto. That's why every time Gaza or Ukraine are raised, the superpowers ensure no progress is made. The veto is the kill switch of global accountability, meaning that almost every major conflict remains in deadlock, a compromise designed to keep great powers inside the system, but the cost of the compromise is paralysis. Procedural complexity and political interests end up superseding necessary action. But the deadlock doesn't stop at the UN. The World Trade Organization, which establishes the rules of trade between nations, has stood by and watched as tariffs and trade wars have come back into fashion. The International Monetary Fund is supposed to act as the last financial resort, offering loans to countries that are facing severe economic crises. But for years, the IMF has been seen as a net negative across much of the global south, perceived as making situations worse rather than better. Just like the Galactic Senate, our own global governance systems have become too slow to react to crises. So, what happens when global governance stops working? Well, in Star Wars, 2 things happen. Firstly, an alternative arises: the Separatist Alliance. The Separatists are made up of states that feel like the system is mired in corruption and focused on the interests of the few rather than the needs of the many. It was the exact same sentiment that drove the creation of alternative economic blocs like BRICS. BRICS, led by Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is explicitly designed as a counterbalance to organizations like the World Trade Organization BRICS isn't a villainous organization. It's made up of actors who have decided the cost of staying in a broken system is higher than the risk of building a new one. Its establishment was arguably one of the first steps towards a multipolar world. In reality, world orders don't collapse overnight. They decay slowly until one day the rules simply stop working. When the systems fail or don't work for everyone, actors build new ones. The second thing that happens in Star Wars is, predictably, war. The Clone Wars emerged as the Galactic Senate failed, a series of battles between the Old Order and the new Separatist Alliance. There isn't a direct one-to-one link between the Clone Wars and our world. The Western world and BRICS are not in open conflict, but many of our current conflicts do loosely fall along these lines. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was at least partially a response to growing Western influence in its geopolitical backyard. And then we have the ongoing Iran war. While the original stated objectives of the war were to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons and to free the Iranian people from an ostensibly oppressive theocracy, looking deeper gives us a better understanding. Iran sits at the center of a regional power struggle, opposed by the United States and Israel, while maintaining strategic ties with Russia and China. Just as in Star Wars, as the system breaks down and opposing forces begin to assert their interests, war breaks out. Multipolar competition in action. Star Wars has a lot to say about the current state of geopolitics, but it's far from a perfect metaphor. In the movies, the breakdown of order and the escalation to war are all part of the supervillain's plan to centralize power into an empire. And while there are some similarities, plans rarely unfold like that in reality. But ultimately, the Republic in the movies didn't collapse because one villain took power. It collapsed because the system stopped working. What we are seeing in our world is that when institutions stop solving problems, actors increasingly operate outside of them. This fragmentation leads to alternative institutions, but it can also lead to the rise of regional blocs, new centers of power, proxy conflicts, and direct war, like what we're seeing in our world right now. As always, this video is not about saying that Star Wars represents our future. It's about trying to understand what's really happening as a starting point to try to make things better. The end of a world order isn't the end of the world. It's the clearing of the ground. Our next videos will try to answer what comes next. But in short, don't watch the Star Wars prequels to see the future. Watch them as an autopsy of the present. Thank you so much for watching to the end. It means more than you know. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and share your recommendations for other science fiction I should cover in the comments. Come back next week for the next episode, and join the signal for more videos on geopolitics, power, ideology, and changing the world.